On today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast, don't you just hate when you get fired from a job because somebody else got fired from theirs?
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome in to another episode of Locked On NHL, your daily NHL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day. Make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On NHL is brought to you by FanDuel. You can get the season started with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's episode of Locked On NHL, we react to the big news that Jim Montgomery is taking over for the St. Louis Blues, and that means that the Blues making a coaching change as well. So we'll talk about all of the particulars. Well, let's take a look at Kirill Kaprizov avoiding a major injury scare and how the entire state of Minnesota is collectively sighing a big sigh of relief. We'll also talk about Connor Bedard, who is off to a little bit of a nondescript start for Chicago. We'll take a look at the numbers and what he needs to do to get back on track, as well as understanding that it's just part of the process. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wilds, joined by my Tuesday Western Conference counterpart, J.D. Young of Locked On Sharks. And J.D., as we said in the open, Jim Montgomery got fired from the Boston Bruins because of a bad roster, and he gets hired by the St. Louis Blues, who had a coach and got rid of their coach because of a bad roster.
Brutal. The NHL coaching carousel is brutal, like cutthroat, to be honest, at times. And you see is just like, it feels very much like the grass is always greener on the other side when it comes to hiring these coaches. And it's like, what's the Arrested Development meme? You know, it may not have worked for them, but it might work for us. And yeah, I definitely feel like that. And it's hard, especially with a coach who's they've been there 22 games. How are you supposed to do anything like when it comes to like installing and I know they had this roster, there's a lot of kind of carryover with this roster, but still like I don't know if the Blues have higher expectations for who they actually are. Even in their little kind of like press, they talked about Montgomery being able to navigate kind of with an eye on the future. And it's like, well, what are you doing? Are you trying to rebuild or are you trying to make the playoffs this year? Because I don't know. I think they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. But I feel bad for Bannister. I mean, it's not like the Blues were a very good team to start this season, but they had two really, really nice, big, like kind of from behind wins, but they really struggled to open the season, but it really struggled kind of since then to find any consistency. And it's the offense has been brutal for the Blues, and they're hoping Montgomery can try to spark some offense because this team should be scoring more goals with all the talent they have, especially in the forward department. But as we talked about in our preseason, kind of this blue line is very, very up there in age, and you wonder if that might be a reason why this team can't score goals right now.
Yeah, it's just it strikes me as a little bit of a weird move, but I think it's one that the Blues didn't want to get beat on because they clearly after Craig Berube was let go, they brought in Drew Bannister and they were like, well, we're going to see how this goes. And they did end up getting themselves in the mix for a playoff spot last year. Didn't end up making the postseason, but I think felt that it was it was a step in the right direction. But the thing too is that you give a guy a short extension, like as the actual head coach, which leads you to believe that you're not sold on him being the guy that can lead this team to the promised land. And Montgomery is heralded as a teacher, a leader, but is he going to go? Is he going to step between the pipes and make all the saves? Is he going to?
Can he score?
Can he score? Can he skate back on an odd man rush and try to break it up? Like, at the end of the day, it is a Blues team, like you said. It's a Blues team that has dealt with a ton of injuries so far this year. And that's just not something that is the old adage, you can't fire a team, but you can fire a coach. The press conference was just bizarre too. Like, you're openly admitting, well, we made this move because guys like Jim Montgomery don't come around all that often. And
he just came around.
he's there, but I'm going to read you the numbers of where the St. Louis Blues team stands right now from a statistical standpoint. They are third worst in the NHL at 2.36 goals per game. Third worst.
I always like to. Are they below or above the Sharks? That's always my. If you're below the Sharks on any indicator, you're a horrible team.
They are below the Sharks, and ironically, they are 2 spots ahead of the Boston Bruins, who Jim Montgomery just left. So, but then some of the other numbers too, from a special teams perspective, the St. Louis Blues actually better 25th on the power play at 16.7%. On the penalty kill, they come in and they're actually where even are they? 24th on the penalty kill at 75.9%. So they're just really not anything that they can hang their hat on. But this, I think, maybe leads you to, this is a move that is made to make them a bigger contender next year and beyond, because now Montgomery can get in there. He can roll up his sleeves. He can get his hands dirty. He can see who is going to be a fit and who isn't. Mm-hmm. But make no mistake, like, the reason that this team is where they are is because of the moves that were made, but also the depth is just, they don't have the depth to be able to withstand these injuries that they've sustained so far. And so Montgomery's going to get the rest of the season to tinker, to tweak, much like John Hines did after Dean Evison was let go at basically the exact same point of the year, give or take a day. He's going to get the opportunity to just try to inject some life into this team and to see if he can make a turnaround this year. Otherwise, it's full bore on to next year and trying to be one of those top teams in the Central when the season turns to 2025, 2026.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this team, right, over their last 10 games. So November 5th, they beat Tampa. Nice win, 3-2. Lose to Utah. They get blown out by the Caps. They lose to Buffalo. Lose to Boston. Lose overtime to Buffalo. They beat Boston in overtime. Lose to Carolina, lose to Minnesota. They beat the Sharks in a shootout, and they lose to the Islanders. Like, nothing about that inspires confidence from you if you are the Blues. And like you said, this team is dealing with a ton of injuries right now. But again, like, what point to me what they are good at, or like kind of the direction of this team. That's what we even going back to like, what is the direction of this team? What is this team trying to be? And maybe that's where Montgomery can come in and try to set a direction and be like, we're going to be really good. We're going to be awesome on the power play. Let's fix the power play. Let's try to do that. Let's see which guys are going to be here. I want it to kind of be here for the long term. But yeah, this team just confuses me. They're the creamiest of creamy middle teams because it just feels like they have no direction right now. So hopefully Montgomery can come in and try to fix that. But yeah, watching this team, and even they barely beat the Sharks. Like, they barely beat the Sharks in that game. Like, it is, yeah.
And you look at some of just to kind of put a bow on this, the teams that they are contending against in the Central Division. I mean, the Wild have beat them twice, 4-2, 4-1. And just looking at how they've done against some of the other Central Division teams so far this year, they lost to Winnipeg 3-2. They lost to Utah 4-2. They have not stacked up against the Central Division so far this year, and so that's probably another indicator that this is just something that's going to need some major work going forward. And let's get started on it now as opposed to putting it off until the off season.
Yeah, I mean, this team is literally 3 points away from being the worst team in the NHL. Like, it is, they're 7th right now in the Tankathon standing. Like, this team is closer to bottoming out than they are, I think, to making a playoff run. And I think they need to have that long look in the mirror and try to decide what are we and what do we need to be going forward.
Very long look in the mirror. Well, speaking of those creamy middle teams, a team that has surprised this year got a major sigh of relief yesterday, or over the weekend, I should say, as we learned the length of injury for Kirill Kaprizov thanks to an MRI. We'll talk about his status and what this means for the Minnesota Wild as we continue today's episode of Locked On NHL after this. Today's episode of Locked On NHL is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the only daily money sports platform that has an injury insurance policy as well. So if one of your players gets injured, this happened to me 3 weeks ago. Jordan Mason for the San Francisco 49ers got hurt in the first quarter, like the first drive of the game. Never came back. Prize Picks would have you covered because your lineup stays live if one of your players leaves in the first half of your game. Do you think Connor McDavid's going to get more than 0.5 goals next week? Is Austin Matthews going to hit more than a goal? You can take those and more by heading to Prize Picks right now. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 off instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On NHL. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day. Reminder to check out all of the other daily portions of the Locked On NHL podcast throughout the week. We get you covered with Western Conference, Eastern Conference, Power Rankings, and more. So make sure to check out Locked On NHL and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. So the Minnesota Wild got a big sigh of relief on Sunday as it was announced that Kirill Kaprizov does not have any major damage to his knee. And by all accounts, according to Michael Russo, feeling better. And so that is a big relief for a team that has already lost Kaprizov for chunks of games for a couple of his seasons so far. Got knocked out by Brendan Dillon of the Winnipeg Jets, cross-check to the back that took him out of action last year. The year before that, he got kind of collapsed upon by Logan Stanley, the baby giraffe just learning how to walk, basically is how that went, and he missed 20 games. So it is something that has seemingly happened. I had people ask me this, if we need to be concerned about Kaprizov being injury prone. And I'm like, no. This isn't a situation of somebody being injury prone. This is a situation of somebody being one of the best players in the league and therefore drawing attention of lower portions of the lineup of other teams to try to slow him down. And it was a knee-on-knee hit by Kagula of the Edmonton Oilers, And it's just one of those things. It was a bang-bang play. I don't know how you look at this situation and say that Kaprizov is injury prone because other teams are seemingly taking it out on him on a nightly basis.
Yeah, I think injury prone for me is guys who especially if you have the same injury over and over, like soft tissue injuries, stuff like that. There's also just the guys who are just unlucky who have right as soon as they kind of get better, it's like bam, they get hit with another injury. And we all have had those players who we've rooted for who just can never stay healthy. But no, I think Kaprizov, I would not put him in one more injury and then we can have the conference. I'm kidding. No, I don't know. With Kaprizov, there is few players I think in the league who mean as much to what their team's success. I mean, you point to Connor McDavid, who's pretty good. You point to some of those super duper stars, and Kaprizov is entering that territory. Looking at some of his numbers, which I'm sure you probably have these tattooed on you somewhere, but Kaprizov at 5-on-5. When he's on the ice, expected goals for at 5-on-5 and about 325 minutes played is 14. They've scored 22 goals with him on the ice at 5-on-5. That's good. You're performing way better than expectations. And this Wild team, which you've joked about, I've joked about as being the creamiest of creamy middle teams, this year has really played really well and is an upper crust team this year. And if they have aspirations to get to the second round of the playoffs, they're going to need Kaprizov to be fully Kaprizov, because when he's on the ice, he's 100% a game changer. When he's on the ice, he makes things happen that normal people just don't make happen. And yeah, I wonder, especially right now, since the Wild are playing well, you just want to make sure he's 100% ready to go, especially for a stretch run. Maybe they kind of keep him out a little bit longer, but hockey players, right, as soon as they feel like they can skate, they're going to be right back out there. So I'm curious to see how the Wild navigate this with that balance of the Jets are really far out there. I don't know if we're going to be able to catch the Jets. You don't have to really worry about third place. You're pretty solidified in your second, as you're the 2 seed in the Central. Do you just rest Kaprizov, make sure he's 100% ready to go? That way you don't have this maybe pop up later on.
Well, funny you should mention the Jets being really far out there. The Wild are 4 points back with a game in hand heading into last night's game, which I should preface we're recording this before. So hopefully we are talking about a Wild team that's 2 points back with the same number of games played after a 15-0 win over the Jets. I'm hoping that's what happens, but we'll see. But I think the key thing here for this Wild team has been the emergence of Matt Boldy as that key number 2 option and a key contributor to where if Kaprizov takes a ton of attention from the opponent, Boldy can step up and say, all right, I'll do my thing and we'll be fine. The Wild have been a team that has been built on strong defense. They are allowing the fewest expected goals 5-on-5 of any team in the league. The goaltending has been really, really good all season. And so it doesn't matter who's in the lineup from an offensive perspective. They're going to shut you down defensively. And they're just going to be opportunistic to try to get 1 or 2 goals that end up making the difference. So it's a Wild team that is very much looking at Winnipeg just ahead of them in the standings and trying to send a message. I keep wondering aloud myself if this will be the year that we see the Minnesota Wild make a big splash at the deadline to try to really separate themselves from the rest of the pack. They've got the defense that'll play in the postseason. They've got the goaltending that'll play in the postseason. Can they just get somebody in that can give them a little bit more of that playoff shine, so to speak, can help score in the top 6? Brock Nelson. Do they go that route or something like that? That'd be what I would like to see, and we'll just have to wait and find out, I guess.
Before, just look at their schedule really quick before we finish up here. Like they play Winnipeg tonight, and as you're listening, you'll already know the outcome. But then they play Buffalo, who played better, but still not like. Then they play Chicago, Nashville, Vancouver, Anaheim, Kings, Utah. Like the schedule's kind of soft here, so it might come out as a nice time for Kaprizov to get some rest, and then kind of mid-December is when the schedule really kind of ramps back up again, when they definitely want to have him back. You have games against Vegas, Florida, at Winnipeg, Dallas. Like you have some games coming up at mid to end December, so might not be the worst time. Again, give Kaprizov as much time as he needs. You got a soft schedule here against teams you should be able to beat even without Kaprizov. And again, maybe they also, like you said, maybe they're aggressive and they make that trade, that first domino trade for sooner rather than later to try to at least help fill in for Kaprizov. So
I certainly hope so. But knowing Kirill, he suited up and he played. I know he did take warm-ups. So that Iron Man in him is probably just raring to go. And we'll see.
You gotta save him for himself sometimes. It's like just sit down, enjoy Thanksgiving, buddy. We'll see you next week. So
we go from a player who is thick in the Hart Trophy consideration at this point to a rookie sensation who's having a little bit of a rough go in year 2. We'll talk about Connor Bedard and a slow start for him in his sophomore campaign as we finish today's episode of Locked On NHL after this.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So you get a hunch in the middle of the game. You can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Give me Detroit just romping on Thanksgiving. That's what they do. They're just going to continue to do it. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Home stretch of today's episode of Locked On NHL. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day. Seth and J.D. finishing things off, talking about Connor Bedard, who won the Calder Trophy last year. This year, a little bit of a slow start. He's got 3 goals and 12 assists in 20 games for the Chicago Blackhawks, who, according to ESPN, are tied for the worst points percentage in the NHL. Heading into Saturday's matchup against the Philadelphia Flyers, Bedard had gone 11 straight games without a goal. And here's what Bedard told ESPN on Friday. I could name 100 things I can do better. He said, I don't know, man. It's just been frustrating for sure. I just don't feel like I'm really doing anything. So just keep chipping away at it, I guess, and hopefully find my game again. This is, I think, a very good case study as to something that I've really tried to push in Locked On Wild. It takes players from Wayne Gretzky all the way down. It takes every single player a different amount of time to have that light bulb moment when you first start at the NHL level, and that moment where things really start to click, really start to come easy. The game slows down, all those cliches. And I'm not trying to suggest that Connor Bedard is, overmatched at this point, but I think the thing that we need to keep in mind, he's 19 years old.
Yep.
And so any struggles that he is having right now are because he's going toe-to-toe against a bunch of 30-year-old guys, and he's 19 years old. He's going to be fine. He's going to figure it out. This is just, he put a lot of things on film last year that the NHL had the entire offseason to digest, to analyze and to come up with a way to counterattack. And so now it's on him to counter that, the counterattack. It's on Bedard now to make adjustments to what the league is doing against him. And that is when you're going to see the numbers increase, the goals will improve. And it would not shock me in the slightest if we get to the end of the season and his numbers are exactly where we expected they'd be.
Yeah, you think for a guy, and one, like, as you said, 19-year-old kid, like, you're going to have your ups and downs. And even budding superstars like Connor, they're going to have their up and downs. Two, he's still doing a lot of positive things. He's just not seeing the, it's that whole, like, process over results right now. And I don't think he's seen the results that he wants. But, you know, I saw, like, on NHL, they're talking about, do we maybe move him to wings, try to make his life easier? But it's like, you look at the Chicago roster, like, it's bad, right? There's not a lot of stuff on it. Taylor Hall, who you kind of expected to be his running mate, was a healthy scratch last week because of, you know, just his play. Like, it's a bad roster that is going through struggles. And Connor Bedard with 3 goals, like, would you be surprised if sometime in the next week or so, Connor Bedard puts up a hat trick and we're talking about, oh man, look how great Connor Bedard is. It's just, you have to kind of go through it and sometimes, and you're going to see this. If he keeps working the process, the results are going to come. And, you know, looking at where he ranks even among the Chicago Blackhawks, right? He's Corsi 4, so shot attempts 4. He's like a 12th on the team. In that regard, like when it actually comes to the percentage, expected goals for, he's number 1 or number 2 on the team behind Alex Vlasic, who plays more minutes, of course, as a defenseman. Like you're seeing positive things from Bedard, but you're just not getting the results. And I think that will. The math tells me, you have to believe the math. The math tells me it's going to turn around at some point, and we're going to be talking about Connor Bedard, like just going on a hot streak here. It's I believe in the math too much, and Connor Bedard's too good of a player to have this. So yeah, I'm not worried. It's just
Think of any sport. Think of if you're a golfer. Think of going out to the golf course and your driver's not working. What do? You start pressing. You start to try to change things up. You end up pulling yourself out of your normal routine completely. And so anytime anybody's in a slump, a lot of times it's due to overthinking. And then what happens? You end up having that epiphany moment where you simplify and you get back to doing what you were doing. And then next thing you know, you've scored goals in 5 of 6 games. It's just, I think it's just something along those lines with Bedard. Just pressing a little too hard, trying to score 10 goals at once. Just got to simplify, just got to dial it back a little bit, and he'll get back on track. I'm not worried about that in the slightest. If I'm Chicago, this is going to sound weird for me to say. If I'm Chicago, he's the last thing that I'm worried about right now. There are a lot of other things on that team that should be more of a concern than Connor Bedard at this point.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Yeah, Connor Bedard will be fine. Again, I think they just need to continue to try to find the pieces around him and see if some of the, you know, guys can step up around him and make his life easier, especially when you look at some of the, you know, kind of veterans who are there, you know, Bertuzzi, Taylor Hall, excuse me. Some of these guys need to kind of take the weight off his shoulders. And you love to see that from him too, right? Just to, like, you know, there's a bajillion things I need to do and stuff, but everybody who has eyes knows, like, this kid's special. He's going to be a special player for a long, long time. Like, you're going to have your ups and downs. So it's weird. The sophomore slump, it's a thing, man. It's a thing. So.
Yes, it is. Not everybody goes through it, but those that do usually get through it, which is why I'm not going to be shocked at all if he goes on a run here. Like I said, he's low on the list in terms of things that are concerning about the start. Because again, 19 years old. 19. What were you doing at 19? I don't even remember.
When I was 19, what was I doing? I was working 2 jobs. I was working at Blockbuster and I was working at Starbucks. So I would open at Starbucks, go home, take a nap, close at Blockbuster, go home, take a nap. That's what I was doing. So,
Oh, Blockbuster.
yes.
The good old days.
What is that? So, anyway, so
yeah. Well, we'll most likely be talking about Bedard going on a heater here before too long. So, Chicago fans that are listening to this, we thank you for tuning in, and also he'll be fine.
He'll be fine.
So that'll do it for today's episode of Locked On NHL. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We have new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.